Very often there's a lot of things that we're meant to focus on, but we sometimes get very easily distracted with the wrong things. So in our religion it's very easy for this to happen. So as we grow up we're taught certain things about how our religion is meant to be, how we're meant to believe, how we're meant to behave. And even we're kind of taught some ideas about how we're meant to connect even with Allah. But despite being taught all of these ideas, very often we actually miss the point. So this causes a bit of a problem, because then we put a lot of energy towards things which essentially are kind of a waste of time. And we take our attention away from the things which we're actually meant to focus on. So, and then when sometimes, even as Muslims, when we are taught to try and bring our attention towards the important things, because we've spent our whole life doing these things, we don't actually realize what the point of these things is. So one of the most underrated things which usually exist in a Muslim's life is praying salah and reciting the Quran. So because these are things from a very young age, we're taught them as if it's normal, it's what everyone does, and it's just a thing that you do. Then, despite these being very powerful tools to actually connect us with Allah, we end up missing the point. So for example, very often when I'm teaching, even children, and you ask the child to slow down when they're reading the Quran, then very often they find it very, very difficult. Obviously with adults it's the same thing. When you ask somebody to recite the Quran and slow down, then it's very, very difficult. So for example, I asked about 10 people to recite the dua for ruku. When we're praying salah and we're in ruku in the bowing position. So I asked about 10 people, 100% of them, 10 out of 10 got it completely wrong, the dua they were reading in ruku. And these are the people that are taking time out to actually learn. But to actually slow down and say Subhana Rabbiyal Azim, because we spend our whole life saying Subhana Rabbiyal Azim and we don't actually know what we're saying. So this is one very simple kind of idea, that the point of bowing before Allah and saying Subhana Rabbiyal Azim is completely missed, and we've just done it as an exercise and not really appreciated what was meant to happen in that submission to Allah. The same with every aspect of our salah. From the moment that we surrender to Allah, from that moment when we say Allahu Akbar, that nobody bigger than Allah has any kind of power in our life. From that very beginning, from that moment, if we start realizing the power of that, when we transcend reality, the world becomes irrelevant when we put our hands up. And when we start appreciating the power of our salah, this is one very simple thing. This is one simple tool. But then again, like I was saying, when we ask people to bring more attention towards this, a lot of the times the issue that we have is that because of the way that we're born, and we're brought up in a society where we're kind of taught very often to race through the Quran, and to learn it as quickly as possible, and to learn as much as possible. And then we teach this to our kids, and then the kids teach it to their kids, and this becomes the norm, just to be racing through the Quran. And the idea of actually reciting the Quran because you're trying to learn it is very rare in our society. To actually recite the Quran so that you can see whether or not you're reciting it properly, and to try and improve it is very rare. We recite it to get through it and finish it and get to the end. The point becomes, sometimes when we're talking about kids, the point becomes the little party at the end. They have a shinni, or in our culture, whenever the child finishes the Quran, we have a big party at the end of it, because we're happy. And the whole mindset is created that the point of the Quran is to read it as quickly as possible, as much as possible, and this is really, really good. So then when this child and this person becomes 25, 35, 45, grows up, then they believe that they know how to recite the Quran. And the idea of learning is actually very difficult to come to. And this is usually the biggest obstacle with everyone. That today it's possible that in our lives we're at a state where we are in need of learning how to pray salah. As scary as that may sound, it's not a bad thing. I mean, it's very common. The Prophet ﷺ, we know that Surah Fatiha is the first surah which was revealed. Meaning it was revealed in early Islam, in Makkah, when the Prophet ﷺ had just started calling people to Islam. Surah Fatiha was revealed. But then we find that despite 10 years later, in Medina, the Prophet ﷺ is teaching the Sahaba, the best of humankind. He's teaching them Surah Fatiha. He grabs one of the Sahaba radiallahu anhu's arm and he says that I'm going to teach you the best surah of the Quran, and he slows down, verse by verse, teaches him Surah Fatiha. They were Arabs, they've all been reciting Surah Fatiha in their salah. But the idea was that just because we've been Muslims for 10 years, for 15 years, it doesn't mean that we don't have to learn how to recite the Surah Fatiha. So this is something which happens with the Prophet as the best teacher and the Sahaba as the companions. So very often it's just the idea that it is possible for me to learn. And sometimes, again, our kids grow up in a society which is actually, it doesn't teach about Allah. It makes no sense to pray salah and connect to a divine being. People don't understand that. And then when we as parents also don't understand it, or even the elder brothers, if we are also kind of out of touch with our own salah, and we don't really appreciate it, we're just doing it to get it done. If we're not curious about it, if we're not interested in it, if we're not developing it, if our salah is not connecting us to Allah, and what I mean by that is that we're approaching it with a sense of, today I've got another chance to pray, or I've got another chance to learn how to pray, I've got another chance to improve my prayer, and improve my connection with Allah. And when we start thinking about life like that, that every single interaction we have is actually an opportunity for us to become more aware of how much Allah is helping us in our lives and how dependent we are on Allah. So again, this takes sometimes bringing this idea of not knowing into our lives. We speak about mistakes very often as if they're very bad, and again, the education system of the world around us teaches us this, that if you fail an exam, that's very bad. But again, in Islam, we don't really go by results that much. If you look at Nuh alayhi salam, one of the most, probably he'd be in the top 5 of the most successful people ever to walk on the face of the earth. One of the greatest messengers of Allah. But if you look at his actual output, which was happening at his time, he gave da'wah for 950 years. He called people to Allah. But in total, only about 80 or 90 people actually listened to him. So it wasn't so much about what he was achieving, but it was about the effort that he was putting in. Sometimes we become people who believe that we are already where we need to be. We're already praying very well. We're already very good Muslims. And the very idea of thinking that we know, thinking that we're very good, it gives us obstacles to the growth that we're actually, the reason that we actually exist. If you look at a baby when they're born, the most exciting thing babies do is when they actually explore the world. They don't differentiate between learning and their play. The most fun thing a baby does is when it learns to walk. It's so exciting for the whole family and the baby. When a baby looks at the water and learns to hold a toy, learns to speak to people. So the most that we've learned, we all have also learned to walk and speak. The quickest that we learned and the most information that we learned was when we were learning as play. But then our education system makes learning something separate. Even though learning is the reason we exist. Like, as human beings, one of the main reasons, this is why babies love learning so much. And it comes so naturally to them, because it's something which, as a human being, it's in our nature to always want to get better. But then we grow up and we're taught that you have to learn, and then you're allowed to play sometimes. And then we start not being very good at learning. So it's important, again, with our salah, with our Quran, and again, even anything we want to learn. We bring this idea that, inshallah, I can practice my salah and make it better. And then I can practice my Quran and make that better. And everything about my relationship, my whole life, it's something which is changeable, it's something which I can work on. And the more we bring this attention towards ourselves, and then if next week we think about how, based on what we learned today, our salah has actually got better. And then we start thinking about our own salah. And we'll see that just when we bring that focus and attention towards our own relationship with Allah, we're able to really transform it very, very quickly. So I make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala firstly gives me the ability to understand and act upon what has been said, and all of us the ability to bring more concentration in our salah.